funneling in. Today's edition is going to be really, really exciting, especially for those students and educators that have questions about collegiate esports.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, excited to do it.
Perfect. Well, our live streams are up and running. So Rich, I think we are good to go.
Awesome. Well, hello everyone and welcome. We at the USAEL are so excited to kick off today's edition of the Careers in Esports webinar series.
This is the fourth entry in our recurring series of webinars that aims to provide students, educators, and esports enthusiasts with a unique opportunity to explore a multitude of jobs and career pathways in esports.
That's right, and you all know the deal by now. Every month we talk to a different expert from the world of esports and gaming. The roster includes professional players, coaches, game developers, tournament organizers, and a variety of others to give our listeners, you, firsthand insights and expert advice on pursuing a career in the esports industry.
Our guest list is full of industry veterans stemming from companies and organizations that have established a significant presence in the space, such as the ones you can see on screen.
But as usual, let's first start with some introductions. I'm Rich Conti.
And I'm Peter Poligolov.
And we are your recurring hosts for this Career in Esports webinar series. Please remember throughout this series, remember to post your questions in the chat to be answered in the Q&A portion at the end.
Rich, are you excited to introduce our next guests?
Absolutely. And today we are talking to two amazing collegiate esports directors, and I've even dusted off my old college jersey that I've got on now here today.
I noticed that.
Fits a little more snug, but Rich, would you do the honors then of introducing our guests?
That's right, absolutely. Without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce to our audience Sky from the University of Hawaii and Jay from the Grand Canyon University. Thank you for both being here today.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you having us.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into our first question.
And this first one is a question for the both of you, but let's actually start with Sky here. What role has gaming played in your lives?
Yeah, for me, I grew up really loving and adoring Street Fighter 2 as a kid. So I grew up in Hawaii, but I also grew up in Southern California, and part of my life in Southern California was consumed with two big things. That was skating and arcades, right? So I definitely predate everybody here in terms of age. And so, me going to a 7-Eleven, going to a bowling alley, going to an arcade was a very common thing for me growing up, including, like I said before, skateboarding. Street Fighter 2 was not only a game that really captured the imagination of myself, it was also kind of a babysitter for me. Growing up in a single-parent family home, games were, an important part of the background noise of my upbringing. And so it continued to be that way throughout my entire life. And it wasn't until I started to think about my role and my ambitions around academics that I started to reflect upon how important games were, how crucial they were. Because I think a lot of things in our lives, when it comes to things like games, it sort of is pushed aside as kind of like frivolous or just a side activity. But for me, I think for many other people, especially on this call, games were fundamental to my youth and my young adulthood. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jay, what are your thoughts on how gaming has played a role in your life?
Yeah, so on my end, same as Sky, right? Gaming's always been a cornerstone of my life. Little different, like Sky said, I'm not quite as old, right? But I got to learn a little bit about the older games when I was a kid. My mom grew up playing Mario. I come from a Mario family. We all grew up passing controllers around on the NES and the SNES at Thanksgiving and Christmas and the different family gatherings we would have. And that's how I fell in love with gaming. It was Mario, Super Mario Bros. 3, Dr. Mario, with family. That's how I fell in love with it. And like a lot of folks, graduated from those games as I grew up into, more sports games like Call of Duty, right? And once I started to get into middle school, high school range, and I grew up an athlete in South Mississippi in the Southeast, right? But as I started to find that maybe sports wasn't going to be my end all, right? Maybe I wasn't going to be, a Major League Baseball player. I kind of realized that gaming was replacing a lot of the things that I was looking for in traditional sports, right? The teamwork, the communication, the competitiveness. That was the big thing for me, was coming out of baseball and wanting to have something that still drove me competitively. Call of Duty was a one-to-one replacement for that. And Call of Duty Ghosts, actually their clan feature, is what kind of opened me up to the wide world of esports and gaming operations. I figured out how to run a team and a clan and, again, an operation in a way that once I got to college, I realized that's the way that I wanted to spend my life. So I got to college, started the Overwatch team, and from beginning to end, gaming has always been a cornerstone and a home for me. So that's kind of the way it started, and that's where it's at now. And that's what I would say gaming means to me. It's a home and a cornerstone.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. I'm curious. So, Jay, you mentioned sort of the competitive aspects of gaming really drawing you in, and then Jay, you mentioned sort of the importance that you sort of realized later on, that the role that it played. I'm curious from you guys, what sort of skill sets do you think that you developed from gaming? Maybe we'll start with Jay now. Yeah.
I would say my biggest one is it was something I've had always. I've always been naturally this way, but it's something that gaming really helped me develop more than anything else, in my opinion. And that's the ability to lead. That, again, when I was working as a clan leader in Call of Duty Ghosts, I'm figuring out how to communicate not only with my friends, right, but the 40-year-old who has 2 kids across the country that can play on Fridays from 8 to 12, right? And how to get the best out of him in that moment, right? And also, how do I reach my end goal with these 30 people I have across the country and their different priorities and my different priorities, right? So I would say that gaming at the very beginning, it really taught me how to lead effectively, because, that's how it starts in clan wars, and then it graduates to, managing scrims and managing times for other players. And that turns into, okay, now I'm the president of the club, and now I'm managing schedules and timelines and deadlines and things like that. So I would say it really helped me further develop the ability to lead. I've always been a natural leader, but it further helped me with the ability to lead.
Oh yeah, I remember those Call of Duty clan days. Sorry, Sky, go ahead.
For me, it is a life lesson outside of the game that really translated for me. It was this idea of how am I able to operate, socialize with folks that I would normally not socialize with. And what I mean by that, like I said, there's a lot of things that I've learned and grown from with games itself. But, I think what is a more of a poignant moment for me is, growing up in Southern California, I grew up in one of the more tougher neighborhoods in San Diego. And one of these neighborhoods had a Street Fighter cabinet located in a bowling alley, in which was frequented by one of the top Mexican gangs in our neighborhood. And just lo and behold, some of the best Street Fighter players were these notorious gang members. And so if I wanted to, find a challenger or find somebody I wanted to play at that was at a high level skill, I would have to go into this bowling alley and summon up the courage to put down a quarter and to contemplate whether I should try to beat this person. And if I do, would I get punishings outside of the game itself? But I think what was interesting about that is that in no other situation would I be shoulder to shoulder to somebody of stark contrast to my personal upbringing or my background. And it allowed me for a few moments, 5, 10, 20 minutes to be shoulder to shoulder, like I said, with somebody in which we could share in this moment of play, right? And play is sort of fundamental here. It allowed us to kind of cross barriers, to find commonalities, to share a common point of attention and focus, and to say that this is what we'll do. There's going to be sort of this moment of commune in which, we are just going to have fun together. And then we would depart ways in some respects in that way. And that has always been there with me with games. It's brought me into spaces, co-located shoulder to shoulder, physical locations with folks that are actually quite different from myself. And I've always appreciated that through and through.
It really speaks to the idea of esports being an equalizer, an equal playing field for everybody, right? Regardless of their background, physical ability. We've seen students really find, as you said, the commonality. The esports is that kind of common passion that where they can compete regardless of where they come from, right? That kind of thing. But we're going to jump over to our next question, and this is more about your current occupation. So for both of you as well, and Sky, we can start with you if you don't mind. In your own words, what are the responsibilities of an esports director at the collegiate level?
They are vast and they're varied. And for me, the responsibilities are, of course, number one, just to make sure that students are engaging with our program that in a way that's meaningful. I think that's really key. So we're more than just janitors opening up a space and locking the doors and making sure nothing gets burned down. So one hat I do wear is just to make sure that students understand that what they're doing is a little bit different, right? So one thing that I've always mentioned in my research as both as an academic, but also somebody that does direct a program, is that what we have here is nothing that has been there's nothing that's new, right? I've repeated this over and over in many different interviews, so apologies if you've heard this before, but what we're seeing here is a result of really decades upon decades of student interests and involvement and passions around video games and higher education. What is new is the fact that there is a administrative and organizational interest in supporting these activities. And so I try to marry the two to say that students should be involved in our program in a way that summons up and amplifies students' passions. So that's the one goal. And for that allows me to have students create initiatives, create activities, create workshops, create events that comes from the ground up, right? It's quite grassroots. On the other end, I also have them understand that we are kind of situated within higher education and within a college that has specific rules and policies and protocols in which they have to understand that, if we want to participate in a particular league, or if we want to create a particular social media post, that we want to reflect upon it. Like, we don't just join any league that's out there willy-nilly, or we don't just post any social media tweet, or X as it's called, that drums up the greatest hits or gets the most eyeballs and most clicks on it. So it's really a balance of the two, to say that my responsibilities are, of course, to summon that grassroots energy and student energy, but also at the same time to understand that it now operates in a very different context than it did 20, 30 years ago.
Thank you, Sky. And Jay, in your role at GCU, anything in common, anything different?
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with Sky on just the fact that it's vast and varied, right? Not just within our jobs, but also across the board, right? My director job looks a lot different than Sky's, look a lot different than Sergio's, right? There's a lot of differences between directors, between schools. So I think it's important to start there. I'm kind of like Sky. We have a few important things that we focus on, right? And I'll kind of talk about the latter two more than the first, right? First, for me, as it relates to my position, right, is setting and supporting goals, right? Driving the boat. We're setting goals. We're talking about where we want to do, what we want to do, and how we're going to get there, right? In doing that, my most important second thing is developing leaders, right? That's something that I don't see a ton of with I'll say the departure of something like TESPA, right? We don't see a lot of just leaders being developed year after year, year over year, right? With attention to detail on what those leaders are like, how they perform, and what their products look like, right? So we take a real focus on that because I feel that our students don't have the same infrastructure that I did when I was a college student, right? So focusing on developing those students as leaders is really important to me. And then the third and really most important thing for the entire program and for the university, because it's the reason why our university created esports as a program in the first place, and that's creating a home for students on campus, right? I went to Mississippi State. I've been at an SEC school where if you don't go to the football game, you don't go to the basketball game, you don't go to the baseball game, you find yourself in that forgotten about category, right? And so how do we get those students who are hanging out in their rooms, who are failing their classes, who maybe aren't creating that social network that you can on a college campus, right? How do we pull them into an environment where there's 1,500 people who like the same games as them, like the same media as them, have the same interests as them, maybe even have the same hobbies and areas of interest / study as them, right? So creating a home and developing leaders are the first two important parts. And then obviously we can't do those things if we don't set and support goals. So my big part is setting and support goals, and the other two big parts for me and as a program is developing leaders and also creating a home for students on campus.
Thank you, Jay and Sky.
Love that.
And talking about your college experience is actually a great segue for Richie's next question.
Yeah, very, very well said. So speaking of goals, why did you both choose to pursue a higher education, and what motivated you to pursue a career in esports? And maybe we'll start with Jay this time.
Sure. Well, I'll cat's out the bag, I think, in most places for me as it relates to college, but I actually didn't finish college. I actually pursued a career in esports because of my success as a collegiate leader at Mississippi State. It really ended up being, for me, one of those things where I was choosing between finals, right? And going and doing work for Coca-Cola in Irvine with Activision Blizzard, right? Or going and working with Team Envy in Dallas, Texas, right? So for me, it was about choosing what I was most passionate about and what path I felt supported me the best. But one of my big reasons for choosing GCU is they stand against students having to make decisions like that, right? A lot of students right now, when they get into college, right, or even when they get to the end of college, they find themselves on two ends of the stick. You either didn't go to college, you didn't finish college, and you've got some work experience, and maybe you can't get that director level job because you don't have your degree, but at least you can make some money, right? Or you're a college student and you get your piece of paper that everybody tells you that you need, and then you go and you try to be a director at an Amazon or a college like GCU, right? And then they tell you, hey, kid, you need 3 to 5 years of experience to even be considered for this job, right? The biggest reason why I chose GCU was because they look to keep students from having to make the decision that I have to make, right? I dropped out and lived on a prayer, and it worked out for me. I have a ton of friends, colleagues, and horror stories, right? From people that I know and don't personally and not, of people who didn't make it this far, right? Because they chose their passion, right? And that didn't work out for them. I would hate for any of our students to ever have to make that decision, and they don't at GCU. You get to come to school, you get to do your degree of interest, your area of interest, your whatever program of study you choose, right? And then on top of that, if they line up or even if they don't, you get to come to GCU Esports and get a job, get scholarships, whether it's on the student leadership side, whether it's on the competitive side, right? So at the end of 3, 4, 5 years of college, you don't have to make a decision and your experience, right? So that was the big reason why I chose GCU and GCU Esports, is because not only do they look to provide a home for students on campus, they're also looking to keep students like me from having to make that hard decision at the end of the day, right? And maybe they don't work out. We're giving our students the tools to be successful. That's why I chose GCU.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Jay. Sky, your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, choosing the University of Hawaii for my own career path in higher education was number one, kind of a no-brainer. It is a institution of Indigenous serving communities. So, somebody of Native Hawaiian background, I feel very compelled to continue to represent Native Hawaiians within higher education because we are so rare in the best way possible. And so, coming to the University of Hawaii has always been a goal of mine, even though it wasn't necessarily a goal of mine for my parents. There is kind of a push for local kids to go to the mainland and to do their educational work, and which I did. I left to go to Washington State, tried it a little bit. After the first year, thought, what am I doing here? It's, snow is wonderful for 1 year, but snow on the second year is pretty questionable. And so, I actually actively tried to get back to the islands, to go back to UH, which I was able to do that for my master's and of course, for my PhD. And so choosing University of Hawaii, and again, when we talk about collegiate esports, these programs are not just shaped by the directors, but also shaped by the institutions themselves. And so, it's kind of, a default to say collegiate esports in sort of this nebulous glob abstract way, but really they are contextual. Whenever I talk to my students about esports or collegiate esports, I really emphasize that they need to discuss where is this being grounded? Where is it located, right? You need to talk about the geographical context of where these programs are situated to speak meaningfully about collegiate esports, to be honest. And so it's kind of a land acknowledgement on my side to say you need to really be, quite specific about that. And so University of Hawaii brings that context for me as an institution that is Indigenous serving. Why esports? It came when I started my master's and PhD program, in which my advisor asked me, what topic do I want to study? And that kind of, shell shocked me because I didn't know what to study. I knew that it had to do something with technology and society because those are two issues that really kind of motivate me, intellectually. But, one of the great things about, again, the University of Hawaii is that we do have advisors who for my PhD is Dr. Jennifer Winter, who are very open-minded and very willing to let students really think critically about topics that they want to study. And so with that, she told me, back in 2015 and 16, when I was looking to do research on college esports, she said to take a look at the lay of the land, which at that time you just had RMU emerge as the first program. And that caught my fancy, and I told her I wanted to do my first research paper on collegiate esports back in 2015. And I traveled to RMU, looked at it, was absolutely amazed at what was being built. And for my PhD, I decided to continue that topic and do my dissertation, which, at this moment is the first collegiate esports dissertation that exists. Yeah.
That's awesome. And staying in the topic of collegiate esports, but jumping into our next question, Sky, could you tell us, in your opinion, why are structured esports programs important for colleges and universities?
Why they're important? I think one thing that really is important about institutionalizing these programs is longevity. What we have seen pre-2014 with the development of our RMU is that these communities, these attempts, these initiatives really come and go every 4 years, right? With certain cohorts of leaders. And so I think Jay, hits it right at the nail on the head, is that, collegiate esports in its sort of early incarnations were really communities of leaders, of student leaders. And once those leaders left, you had to rebuild what was created, right? And nothing wrong with that. That's how clubs operate. That's how, student organizations operate. And there's something beautiful actually about an unstructured program. So I don't want to say that structure is the only way to go. There is something wonderful and beautiful about unstructured programs as well. But there came a point within the collegiate scene where there was a need for permanence, for legacy, and for funding. And one of those things that you need for those three milestones is institutionalization within the university itself. And so programs are one pathway to that. And so that's, in my opinion, why we've seen such a push and a move towards that organizational structures.
Thank you, Sky. And Jay, any additional thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the longevity piece. I think that's obvious in the world of collegiate esports. I was part of that group of collegiate cohort leaders, right, who ran it all the way up. We get billboards and Twitch student and Coca-Cola, and then you leave and students wonder, what do I do with this, right? So you kind of have to go backwards. That 3 years passed. Now you're rebuilding, right? So I think longevity is one. The other thing is consistency, right? As it relates to traditional sports, right? We're looking for partnerships. We're looking to make the university believe that we're valuable, right? And we can only show that through consistency over the course of years, right? Not months, not a couple of years, right? Talking a decade or two at a time for our higher ed administration here to go, oh, wow, that's a real thing, or that makes sense, or we can see the value in that, right? Versus a blip every 4 to 8 to 12 years, right? So the biggest thing for me is consistency, because without consistency, we don't provide any value on campus. We only do it every 4 years when a Jay or a Sky comes along, right? And I'm like Sky too. I think there's a beauty. I came from Mississippi State, where I ran it as a crazy college student with a bunch of other crazy college kids, right? That's how we did some of the things that we were able to do. But again, I know that maybe if we had a director, maybe we had somebody, helping us drive that boat, direct the boat a little bit, maybe things would have been more consistent over time and there wouldn't be so many dips in between the peaks.
That makes a whole lot of sense. And if I may ask a follow-up question as well, I'm curious both of your guys' thoughts on how esports programs, and maybe specifically collegiate, maybe not, but how might they foster a sense of community, equity, and inclusion in your campuses? Maybe we'll start with Jay.
Sure. I think the biggest thing, and this is funny, being technically on the administrative side, right? Now being on the inside of a college, I think the biggest thing as esports directors, esports staff that you can do to foster a sense of community on your campus is listen to and respect students. I know that sounds hilarious in a world where we're talking about students and a world that's created because of students, right? But you all know, because we all work at colleges, right? Not everybody necessarily understands / respects students' opinions and their wants and needs, right? And obviously, we can't always have the nice 8K TV that we just want for the sake of wanting it, right? But there are times where students have valid concerns and they have valid voices, right? Those concerns come from valid places. So we listen to our students. We provide forums. We have monthly town halls for our students to talk and tell us what games they want to see, what they like what we're doing, what they hate that we're doing, future ways they'd like to see our dollars put towards, or initiatives that they'd like to see our dollars put towards. So for me, it's about listening to students and really allowing them to help drive the direction of your program. Obviously, we still have goals in mind. We still have a direction in mind, but with the help of our students, we can make sure that our goals and our targets, we don't miss with them, right? So biggest thing for me is listening to students, and that's proven to work so far.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, I mean, I would just iterate that exact point. Listening overall, I would say we need more of that in collegiate. Listening to students, listening to elders, listening to parents. I think within our cocoon of collegiate esports, there's a strong sense of ownership, which is not a bad thing, right? I think a lot of folks that have built up the scene, just like Jay has said, they have a legacy and they have a history. And when they see folks taking a direction that seems problematic or just seems completely insane, when they are not listened to, this creates some very deep divisions within the community itself. And so, yeah, absolutely. This idea of listening and also listening and being attentive to students or communities that are not so visible within the scene. So I think there was a large push to say, like, we want to bring in casual gamers. We want to bring in gamers who play, Dungeons and Dragons. These are actually really great initiatives themselves, but really thinking creatively about the different communities that intersect with games in multiple ways, right? So being intersectional about your thinking around community development is so key. And so for us, again, at University of Hawaii, we are literally one of the most multi cultural campuses in the United States. And that allows me to think about, what type of communities we want to work with and to bring into the space, or even not to even bring into our space, for us to work with them and for us to go into their spaces. Listening allows creativity to flourish and to think broadly about community development. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both. Well said. Our next questions are actually going a little bit deeper into each of your programs. So first, we're going to start with Sky here. If you could tell us a little bit about the program at the University of Hawaii and what inspired you to actually take charge of that program.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I launched my Ph.D. studies 2015. 16-ish, I started to look at where I wanted to do my field work with my dissertation around collegiate esports and student development. I was fortunate enough to have Mark at UCI allow me to actually spend about 2 years of ethnographic and longitudinal research to bounce back and forth between Hawaii and UCI to do my research. In that time span between 2017 and 2019, the question that, of course, emerged during that time was, why don't I do something like this at University of Hawaii Manoa? And so I approached one of my students at that time, Kevin Nguyen, who's now the assistant to the Esports program, and we discussed, why don't we just create something like this at UH? We see what's happening with, of course, RMU. We saw what was happening between RMU and UCI between 2014 and 2016. There was a small flourishing of collegiate programs within the Midwest. And yeah, the obvious question is, why can't this happen at UH? And UH already had a very robust and active community of gamers on our campus, right? Clubs, informal teams, students, friends getting together, playing in our student center, literally on the floor, plugging into an outlet, a random outlet. And yeah, that really inspired me to say that, not only do we want to create a program, but my motivation at the time was, I just want to create better conditions for these students. Whether that be a program, that'd be great, but I really wanted to center the development of our program, UH Esports, around a dedicated location or a space in which they could call home. And that was really the inspiration that led to the creation of what we have at UH Esports.
And one small, but and not small, one culmination of kind of the efforts that you've been doing at University of Hawaii was that you actually had the privilege of hosting the Overwatch League on campus, right, in 2021 and 2022. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience in which the Overwatch League, during the COVID height of the global epidemic, really wanted to figure out, in what way could they bring North American teams closer to Asia without going to Asia because of the COVID quarantines. And again, it required, like I said before, some creative thinking. And somebody said, why not Hawaii? And they called me in 2020, at the end of 2020, and they said, we'd like to come to Hawaii. I thought it was a prank call. I literally was going to hang up on them, and they were like, no, we'd like to hold our tournaments at your campus for the summer, in which we'd fly in, close to 6, 7, 8, 9 teams. They would play from our arena against teams in Seoul and Shanghai. And initially, it was just a facilities conversation, right? So going back to this idea of being creative and forward thinking, I pushed back at that request and to say that this has to be more than a facilities conversation. So with the help of our esports task force, which is a group of folks that work with me, both faculty and staff, they brought up the idea of, why don't we turn this into a set of internships? And that's what we did. We turned it into a conversation of them just renting space to having close to 20 students take part in internships running the summer league itself, right? So we have a group of 40 students who on their resume have put, I have run the Overwatch League for summer 2021 or 2022, right? And it's been an amazing experience, and we're very thankful for the Overwatch League for that.
I can't imagine anything more awesome to have on your resume than helping run the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say on our side, I'll speak candidly about it because it's the most popular superhero right now, right? Guys, I understand the power in seeing yourself in people and things, right? And being able to use that seeing of yourself and people and seeing yourself in people and things to go to where they are or to be like them, right? You see a George Bush, and if you agree with them, right? If you can see yourself in them, right? Maybe you can go, oh, I can be president, right? Maybe you see a designer and they're making clothing and they look like you or they come from the same place as you, and you feel like you can be that person, right? Being a young Black man coming from South Mississippi, where technology is absolutely not king, there's nobody like me back at home. There's nobody like me hardly in the Southeast outside of Sergio Brack over at Maryland, right? Not a lot of guys like me. I didn't have a lot of folks to look at when I was a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and even now at 24, I still don't have a ton of guys to look at that are like me or that have had a similar path as me. The only person that I did have was at Coca-Cola when I was there as a esports ambassador with the whole TESPA and Coca-Cola partnership. One guy that I did have to look up to was Alex Williams. And one of the big things he told me, I'll skip the big story about it, but one of the big things he told me is focus on being dope and doing dope work, right? And that was something that I got to look at him, hear from him, and it allowed me to guide myself on my own esports path, right? It told me, okay, I can do this. He did this. He thinks about it the same way I do, right? He's just like me, comes from the same place as me. I can do this. I wanted to be the same guy for generations to come of people like me, whether you're Black, whether you're from the South, whether you're a guy who likes games and came from baseball, right? Got a lot of different things, whether you like sneakers, right? There's a lot of different things about me that people can identify with. And I want to be that beacon for people to identify with so they can look at me and say, I can do that, right? So that was the biggest reason for me, because as a college student, I wasn't able to look at anybody and say, wow, I can do that. Again, like I mentioned earlier, just kind of lived on a prayer and was lucky enough that it worked out for me. But I'm in this position today because I want to be sure that my brother, my sisters who come behind me, right, they can say, I can do that because he did that. So that's the big reason for me and why I exist here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jay, for kind of talking about this idea of creating positive role models for generations to come. And rotating over to the esports program at GCU, could you tell us a little bit about it and what inspired you to step into the leader role?
Sure. Yeah. So it's two parts. One is exactly what I just said, right? And I guess the other half of that is just being a crazy collegiate leader who thinks he can lead a program, right? Coming out of Mississippi State, that's what I wanted to do. That's what I felt I could do best. So that's one of the big reasons why I'm here. Small funny story about it is I actually grew up going to a private purple and white Methodist college in South Mississippi. It's actually called Millsaps College. Grew up going there. My brother played football there. I went there for 8 to 10 years. It feels exactly the same. It felt exactly the same as a kid as GCU does. Small piece, but one of the real pieces. I'm a very meaning-driven guy. I feel that's a sign from the world, right, that I should be here. That was one of the pieces. But the other piece was exactly what I said earlier with the career things. That was always at the forefront, making sure that students didn't have to make decisions like I made as a college student and maybe wouldn't have outcomes like I've seen because of the decisions that people like me have made. That was the big piece for me. And then the things that we do now, the three that I'll skip over because a lot of the people who are listening to this kind of understand gaming, kind of understand esports, right? We do community, we do club, right? We have esports teams, we have a home on campus where people play and collect and share ideas, right? The other three things that we do, I believe, are a little different from folks. The only guys that compete with us are folks like Sky, right? Who do a great job and think about things the same way that we do. First is our, we normally call it community. Or community C, third C is community. That's having an impact on our local high school communities, right? It's actually why we partner with you guys, USAEL and Rally Cry, right? We want to have a real impact on helping create that pipeline from middle school to college, right? Because again, I know for being a student in South Mississippi, my parents didn't love esports because they don't see a little league system like they see with baseball. They don't see a high school system like they see with baseball. They don't see scholarships and $1 million contracts and then coaching jobs and 32 teams in Major League Baseball. They don't see all the same things that they saw in traditional sports that makes them feel safe pushing their kid into it as they do in esports, right? So one of our big things is contributing to that pipeline that we know students, parents, administrators, teachers, you name it, want and need to see to buy into and push their kids into esports the same way that they do traditional sports, right? The other two C's that we have is career, obviously, right? So we've got about 80-ish student workers, 70 to 80 student workers at any given moment who work on social media, broadcasting, digital marketing, content creation, events, leadership, facilities. We do remote tournament operations. We do in-person tournament operations. So there's a lot of opportunities for students to gain career experience on campus. That's another big piece of who we are and what we do. And like I said, there's not a ton of programs who are focused on that in the same way that Sky and I are, right? The other big piece that is a huge challenge, everybody in Collegiate knows this, it's part of the reason why this exists, right? This webinar exists. Content is a really big piece for us. I know, we all know, we're all gamers, right? Gaming isn't what it is without Optic making the process, without Envy posting about every single win, loss, house stream, every single thing that they did from beginning to end, right? We got to be in the room. We felt like we understood who they were and what they did, and at the end of the day, why they did it, right? So we want to provide that same window to up and coming esports fans, right? We want to provide that window to understand who is Jay, who are his students, what is GCU, what's esports, right? Why should I care? Content's a really big piece for us because without it, we're nobody, right? Without being able to show everybody who we are, how we do it, and why, we're not enticing anyone to understand esports, care about esports, and we're not making ourselves valuable to anyone outside of, like Scott said earlier, the small bubble and cocoon that we exist in, right? So those are the different pieces that we have at GCU Esports. And the last three, I would say, separate us from a lot of other programs.
And once
Amazing.
again, it's awesome how you mentioned about, elevating student leaders and really watching them thrive.
Yep.
That's right. Coming out of college with work experience, extremely, extremely valuable. If I may ask you guys, what teams do you both have? If you could just plug the teams that you have in case there are any students that might be looking to go to GCU or University of Hawaii. What teams do you guys have?
So we have Valorant, Overwatch. Those are scholarship titles because we do, like we were talking about listening earlier, if the students want to compete in a title, we create a team. But right now, our scholarship titles are Valorant, Overwatch, Rocket League, League of Legends, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Those are the 5 that we scholarship right now. And then we have an R6 team, Call of Duty team, Fortnite team, 2K, FIFA, Madden. We've got all the different teams that you can imagine in the world of esports. And then the biggest thing for students to know is that if we don't have that team and you're willing to be the leader of that team, we're willing to teach you how to lead the team. And from there, we create as many teams as our students want to see because our ears are open and we know how to create leaders.
Love it. Awesome. Very wide program. Sky, how about on your end?
Yeah, it's League, Valorant, Overwatch, Apex, Call of Duty, um, Rocket League, Smash. I just started our first MLBB team. It's a mobile esports game, huge in Southeast Asia. Again, speaking to the unique perhaps situation of where UH Esports is, middle of the South Pacific. So um, mobile esports is a part of our program that we're trying to develop and seeking to work with Moonton, which is a Chinese developer for MLBB. I think that's it. I feel like a parent that forgot one of the kids' names.
I'm surprised I got all 5 out, Sky. So
yeah, I think that's all of it. Somebody will mention if I forgot them or not.
Right.
But yeah, it's a
I
big
love
chunk
you
of it.
all equally. I don't have a favorite
Yeah,
child.
exactly.
Yeah, I love you, Apex and Fortnite. You reminded me that I forgot them. So love you, Apex and Fortnite.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And so for any of the students that might be listening right now, what advice might you give them if they did want to turn their passion into a career in either directing or esports operations like you guys? And maybe we'll start over with Sky this time.
I mean, I think this is actually an important question, but one in which I tell students that number one, do what you like to do, right? I think there is a sort of a notion that you need to go down a particular path to do a particular thing, to get into a particular company, to work in esports, right? What we know about the broader video games industry overall is that you can literally name any background, any major, and you will probably find it in a publisher's portfolio, right? You have folks coming from marine biology, economics, literature, of course, in addition to the STEM fields. And, I think that's important to mention. Of course, I know that STEM is a very popular topic to talk about when it comes to careers and to career paths. But I think one thing I really want to highlight is that if you can marry both the social and the technical together, right? Your interest in the humanities, in the liberal arts, in the social sciences, and you can marry that with some technical expertise or technical knowledge, that will get you really anywhere in the games industry itself, right? The games industry, of course, is divided according to specialties, right? That being, web development, operations, as you have here listed, software development, product development, QA testing, right? There's a deeply technical component to video games overall. But what I think is important to highlight is that whatever you're interested in, right? It could be Japanese studies, it could be Asian studies, it could be mid-19th century history. Continue to do what you're doing, to be honest. Do not divert or think that you have to drop what your interests are, what your intellectual curiosities are to get into esports. What I would say is that you can complement that, right? So if you're into 19th century European English history, right? You can complement that with, product development or software development. And you could marry those two to say that, you could do some work around data text analysts work or data scraping, or again, with ChatGPT being a hot topic right now, large language models, right? You can take both of those interests and present it to an Activision Blizzard or to a Valve or to a Riot Games and said, you know what? I may not be the most prolific or talented gamer, but I can write you some amazing lore. Right. And as we know, with all these games, lore is crucial to a lot of players, right? To their fidelity to the game itself. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll say my biggest parts, and again, it's attached to stories as a young esports person trying to figure it out, right? Two different things, because I'm like Sky. I think a lot of people get into gaming and esports with an idea of what it can provide to them or what they're supposed to do, right? What they have to do. I would say that the biggest first thing is figure out what you want to do in gaming and esports and why. I think the why is extremely important, right? A lot of young students, I've been a young student, right? We want to get into gaming because that's how we're going to get rich quick, right? We want to jump on Twitch. We want to stream for 40 hours a week, playing Fortnite like we were going to do with our friends anyway. And we would have become millionaires. Why? Because we think that's cool, because it's what everybody else is doing. There's a lot of different whys, and I'm going to try not to preach too much up here, spiritual guy. I'll get into the whys all day long. But I think it's important to understand and recognize what you're getting into esports for and what you want out of esports and gaming and why, right? Once you've determined that, I think it's really important. I've got a story attached to this one because it broke my world as a 19-year-old in gaming and esports, right? 19 years old, I'm working for the Dallas Fuel. First ever Overwatch League home game, right? I'm like a lot of us when we first started in esports. I want to be a caster and a pro player and a operations guy. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to own a team. And in the middle of doing all that, I'm going to start a clothing company and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do. And so I'm at the after party for one of the first Overwatch League home game weekends. And I'm telling Arrow, head coach for the Dallas Fuel, all of that, where I want to go, what I want to do, how passionate I am about all these different things. And after a while of hearing the crazy 19-year-old kid talk through all the different things that he wants to do, he just kind of holds his hand up and he stops me. He goes, listen, I love your passion. I love your energy. I love that you want to do all the things all the time. 2 things. You can't, and nobody cares. That's it, right? It's not that you can't do a bunch of stuff. It's not that you can't have a bunch of skills. It's that if you're everything, you're nothing, right? If you're okay at everything, you're great at nothing, right? So pick something. Become great at it. If you don't like it, pick something else and become great at that and keep going, right? So for me, it's a 2-pronged approach. Figure out what you want out of gaming and why, and then pick something and stick with it. Because I know as a student, had I not heard those words, I might be running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to figure out how to become a caster. And then also at the same time, how to become an analyst. And then also at the same time, how to become a director, all while being a student, right? So figure out the who and why, or the what and why, and then determine which path you want to go down. And be willing to be honest with yourself about those different paths and try them out truly and honestly. So that's what I would say. And then obviously with the story attached.
In a way that connects to what Sky was speaking to earlier about it being a combination of really the passion for gaming, the passion for esports, the passion for change, and experience, right? Experience in a certain field and being able to push the ball down that field in that one niche, in that one area that you're interested in.
Right.
And our next question is kind of to the benefit of any of the educators, any of the parents that we have on the call. And Jay, I think we'll start with you. Could you tell us a little bit why you think schools today, K through 12 and beyond, should support their students' love for gaming?
Sure. So for educators, parents, teachers out there, right? Anybody over the age of 18 that's looking at esports as why that, right? For me, this is the way I approach it a lot of times with students and or parents, even on our campus at GCU. Take everything that you know about esports and throw it out the window. Throw it out the window. Forget about Ninja. Forget about Booga. Forget about streaming. Forget about all these big lights that you see, glitz and glamour with esports, right? Forget the headlines you've seen. Now take your idea of traditional sports, football, right? All the things that your kid can gain from football, learning how to be on a team, learning how to care about goals that are bigger than him, right? Learning how to behave, how to communicate with other people, right? Effectively, caring about other people's goals, those types of things, and replace football with Valorant and Overwatch and Fortnite and Madden and all these different games that we play in esports and gaming, right? Because their kids can and will and do currently right now at my school, Sky School, Maryville, Maryland, UCI, UCLA, all these different schools, right? They gain those same skills from esports as they do and would from traditional sports. All you would be doing now by telling them, no, don't do that thing, is holding their development back. So allow them to jump into this thing in an organized environment that would give them the same tools and skills that maybe they won't gain from football because they're a gamer, right? So put them in an organized environment where they can gain those things and allow them to grow in the same way that you would allow your football player's son to grow.
And Sky, did you have anything to add as to the whys for the parents, for the students, for the educators out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the whys, I think I go back to the comment I made earlier in a paper that I wrote in 2019 around the development of collegiate esports in North America. My opening sentence is that, again, this is not new. This, games, game culture, video game play has been a part of the very origins of computing technologies in higher education. And we're talking about going back, from the very early days of the origins of mainframe computing itself, when there's a discussion about like one of the first esports tournaments or video game tournaments happening in 1970. And often that fact is being tossed around and little investigation or interrogation is asked about where that video game tournament happened. And it happened at Stanford University. That's often looked over, right? As if it's not a non-factor. But to be honest, games and higher education, campus life, college experiences have gone hand in hand for generations. So the reason why they need to support that is because there is a deep appeal, an attraction by young people to play games with friends as part of their educational experience. And I think that is a core element that needs to be the first step amongst both educators and parents. And it is happening, right? With the, like I said, with the institutionalization of esports happening, with programmatic development, there is a tide of change that's happening. And I think that will continue to happen with parents seeing and understanding just how important games are to not just the development and skill sets and growth that can happen within the game, but just as a means of socialization and community development. It's inseparable, to be honest. Yeah.
Kai, I like how you name dropped the first official esports tournament, right? With Space Wars being the first competitive
Space Wars.
76.
Everybody talks about the date, they talk about the game, they never talk about where it was played. And where it was played is not an accident. It was at a university.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Yeah, I gave me shivers when you pieced it together. I love that. Thank you so much, Sky. And Jay, thank you so much. And actually, so speaking of sort of, we've been talking about pathways a lot. We have some exciting news. So Jay, could you actually tell us a little bit about the esports grant that GCU has been working on?
Yeah, we were actually talking about it 9:30 this morning with the team. GCU is partnering with the USAEL to provide 10 grants total to high schools across the U.S., where we're going to be giving them about $3,000 each, $30,000 total in equipment, swag, technology, right? To not only compete in a high school league, right? Because that's what the parents want to see, right? That's what everybody wants to see out of gaming and esports. We're talking about competitive video games, right? Not only to do that, though, we're also providing curriculum to help students understand what the next steps are, right? It's not just about playing video games. It's not just about how do I become ninja? How do I become booga, right? It's what happens after I graduate high school and I find out that I'm not the guy, like a lot of baseball players do, right? Or what happens when I find out in college, 2 to 3 years into it, that Cloud9's not interested in signing me, right? What's next? Right. And we want to start telling students we already have what's next right now. Not only can you go into what's next in esports, but all the different touch points, like Scott was talking about earlier, we have a lot of different cultural touch points that we're allowed to have here in gaming and esports. Because of that, we're able to open the door to not just gaming and esports and the opportunity that this industry provides, but through that, we're able to show the other side of what gaming and esports can provide if that's the way that you got into this, right? So if you're interested in playing Fortnite, and that turns into an interest in social media, you can become the social media manager for your favorite hometown team. Let's say the Baltimore Ravens, right? If you're from Maryland, right? You can take that interest in Fortnite and turning into a career that you would have never seen before, right? So that's the biggest thing for me. And the biggest thing for us in this partnership is being able to turn this curriculum, turn these tournaments into something real and show the students that there are next steps, show students, parents, administrators, even folks like me and Sky that maybe have been, kind of out of the weeds for some time, right? Showing all these folks that these opportunities and these pathways still exist and you can do something besides just playing video games, right? So showing students what's next.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay, for sharing the exciting news. If there's any educators out there, I really urge you to take advantage of this awesome, exciting opportunity. Unfortunately, we're kind of coming close to the end of the hour, so we're going to transition into our last section. Rich, I know we always try to say this in unison and we always fail, but maybe we'll try it again. Introducing Q&A with Sky and Jay.
Seems like we failed again.
That's all right. One day we'll try again. But I know we did have a couple questions come in through the live streams that we've been running. So I'll go ahead and pull up the first one. So this one's for Sky. Sky, can you share any success stories or notable achievements of students that were part of your program?
Yeah, I would say, for us, the key achievements are seeing students who have moved into industry itself. That comes to mind. So we've had students that have taken my course, gone through our program. Some have gone into industry immediately. Some have actually taken a year off, come back and worked with us at UH Esports. In particular, I'm thinking of a student, Ryan Guerrero, who loves graphics, graphic artists, visual effects, came back, did some work for UH Esports in 2020 and 21, built up a portfolio. And after he built out that portfolio, during the Overwatch League events itself, we worked together to apply for Riot Games, and he was taken on as their visual effects designer and was thrown into the deep end with doing work with Arcane very early on. And so it's stories like these, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's stories like a girl that we had in our program. Her name was Yuki. Her name is Yuki, and she was somebody that kind of stood in the background, was a little bit more reserved when Overwatch came to Hawaii, because she had done Korean studies and also spoke Korean, was multilingual. Somebody who was usually in the background of our program suddenly became part of the foreground of our program and showed up on the broadcasts because she was able to speak Korean, right? Because I would say close to 70% of the Overwatch League is South Korean itself. So a skill set in which she thought really didn't have any relevancy suddenly became incredibly important, right? This idea of being able to speak Korean. So it's stuff like that where I'm able to take a student who is reserved, shy, perhaps a little bit afraid of taking larger steps forward within our program, being able to do that and showcasing that talent itself. So both of these are, for me, in my mind's eye, exceptional examples of that.
And Jay, throwing that question right over to you, any cool success stories coming out of GCU?
Definitely. I think anybody who pays attention to me at GCU knows I've got a fan favorite, and I think I shouted her out on social media today. Tiana Mitchell is one of the students that I'm most proud of, and the accomplishments that she's had. Tiana came to me as a student who didn't know if she was a leader and didn't know if she possessed the capability to lead. Her words, not mine. And from there, she explained she was the only woman who tried out for our Valorant team, our varsity Valorant team. Out of 107 people, she was the only woman who tried out. So she came to us, told us about how the experience sucked. It was awful, right? Really uncomfortable. The only girl there, didn't even feel like she belonged, right? And wanted to change that. At the time, being the crazy collegiate leader that I am, right? We figured, all right, let's start a women's team for every single title that we have. What we did instead was we went to our multicultural office on campus and we asked them, hey, how do we do something like this? How do we integrate women into our esports community on campus, right? How do we create a team for women to feel safe competing on our campus in our facility, right? And through that conversation and over the course of a couple of years, Tiana has created not only an all-women's Valorant team on our campus, but 2 all-women's Valorant teams on our campus. And she also created an initiative called Women Wednesdays on campus because of that, where we shut down the facility it's now once a month, but it started as once every other week. Every Wednesday, we shut down the facility for only women to come in. That was Tiana's idea through the advice of the multicultural office. And at the time when Tiana came to me as the only woman who tried out for any of our competitive teams, and in that case, more specifically Valorant, we were at less than 1% female population at GCU Esports. I could count on one hand how many women we had walking in and out of our facility, and 3 of them worked for us. 3 of them had to be there, right? Including Tiana as one of our club leads. So starting off with 1% when I got here, and after just 1 year, at the end of last year, Women Wednesdays and the Lavender team, as we call it, grew our women's population or female population in the GCU Esports community from less than 1% to 22%. And we're now at 35%. Like it's between 30, 35, check every week, 30, 35% now. So the biggest thing that I'm proud of, the biggest person that I'm proud of is Tiana Mitchell, because not only has she developed herself as a leader, but she's also created a home for a lot of women on campus who simply didn't have one before. And not only has she done all of that, but we've also taken this team and created a place not only for her team to compete in our Purple Rain Valorant series. She also got a $5,000 partnership involvement from Rockstar Energy themselves. Got on the call herself, sold them on the idea, told her what she thought the impact would be, gave them the measurables for the different things they might be interested in, right? And they're signed on for a second year to run a $5,000 16-team collegiate, all-women collegiate Valorant esports tournament, right? So obviously, as you can tell, I'm extremely proud of Tiana and her accomplishments and the things that she's done, not only for herself as a young leader, but for women to come, right? We've even got now one of my new favorites. Tiana's getting ready to graduate, right? One of my new favorites is becoming Billie Jean Staggs, who comes in the shadows of Tiana. She doesn't exist without Tiana, right? So those two are really important to me. And then I'm like Sky. We have leaders, right, that we develop, and we have the projects that they're responsible for and the impacts that they created. But then on the other side of community, something that I'm really proud of is watching students become themselves, right? Not learn themselves, not become confident, not gaining these new things, becoming the same person that they always are and just showing it to people, right? Becoming more confident in that person they've always been and just showing it to people. And the biggest story that I always tell is we had a student named Isaac that was in the facility, right? First day he came in right after COVID, right? He comes in with his hood on, headset on, mask on, sunglasses on the inside, right? Inside. Walks in, speaks really low, trying to figure out what's going on with esports. He's a freshman, right? That's the first month that he comes in the esports facility. We help him out. We help him learn the facility. We help him learn who we are and what we do, learns about our different events, and he starts coming to them a little regularly, still really quiet, right? A couple months pass, still got the hood on, still got the mask on, still got the sunglasses on and the headphones, right? A couple months pass, he takes the hood off and he starts talking to a little bit more people, right? He starts being a little bit more communicative with his community members, right? Couple more months pass, he takes the headphones off and now they're around his neck. And he takes the sunglasses off and now they're sitting on the table, right? He's conversing with people. He's asking questions. He's trying to help at events, right? He's trying to figure out what's going on so we can give information to other people who are like him, right? A couple more months pass, the mask comes off, the curls come out. There's no hood. There's no sunglasses trying to hide his face, right? There's no headphones to keep people from talking to him or keep him from worrying about the different factors that could worry him in a social environment, right? He's now at this place where 6 months later, because of gaming and esports, because of the space we created in gaming and esports, where not only is he himself, but he's like Tiana and he's helping other people see themselves in that, right? So we're really big on the leadership development, but we're also huge on people becoming who they've always been and showing that to other people so the cycle can continue, right? So obviously super proud of Tiana and Billy, but one of the big stories that I focus on is the story of Isaac, because he is kind of the epitome of why we exist as a gaming organization on campus. So those are the two big ones that I'm most proud of.
Holy moly. You're making me tear up a little bit, Jay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Shout out to the students.
Yep.
Amazing. It's a beautiful story.
I know we're running out of time here, so we're going to make time for just one more question that we got in chat.
We'll
Rich,
be here all night. We're in Collegiate Esports, man. Me and Sky are here till it's over, till the job's done.
We have a question from Joe, so shout out Joe as well. He says, first and foremost, thank you guys for doing this. What advice would you offer to individuals aspiring to enter the operations side of the esports industry, particularly in marketing, to take their initial steps into the field?
My biggest thing, I'll jump in. My biggest thing is to start doing something. Start doing something that you can show people, right? That was the biggest benefit that, again, kind of talking about the TESPA era, right? That was one of the big benefits that we didn't even quite realize we had until after it was gone, right? The ability to show your hiring manager, to show maybe a colleague who wants to introduce you to a hiring manager is going to, act as a liaison to a different company that you want to work for. Being able to put all those things on Facebook or LinkedIn or on your own personal website or in a Google Drive that you can at least send over to somebody, right? Creating decks out of those things. Do something that's real so you can show people, because everybody loves somebody who's passionate. Everybody loves somebody a lot more who's passionate and is willing to do the work and can show that they have and will. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would iterate, create projects, right? I think it's an interesting thing just because, I think for this generation and for generations that are coming into the future and for generations just slightly behind, you live in a world no longer in which you are going to work for one company. Not like our grandparents and our parents, in which you can kind of depend on a 9 to 5, I guess, in some respects, or a cradle to grave career. And what that means is that almost anything you do, you need to leave a paper trail and a graphical trail. Don't throw things away. That's one thing as a researcher that I've come to learn is that whatever you do, don't toss things out if you think they're a mistake. Keep your mistakes, file them away, save them. revisit them. And I think that is an important life lesson overall, but in particular, if you're looking at something with operations and marketing or PR or development, create projects, work on them, create a record of what you're doing, create a portfolio, and continue to iterate on everything that you do in that sense. It's a really weird thing to say because it's a life lesson that, I didn't learn until really doing my PhD work, where when I was doing my writing, my advisor would say, you may run into a paragraph or a page in which you're unhappy with. The desire is to hit the delete button, essentially. But rather than hitting the delete button, copy and paste it and put it in a different file. Because what you've written in the past that you think of as mistake can be altered and modified to being something that you could use in the future itself. And so, yeah, as Jay said, start doing things, but in particular, start doing things and then start keeping a record of the things that you're doing. That's a big sort of hiccup within collegiate esports or gaming overall, or, in particular around youth culture, is that there is a diminishing understanding of the importance of your past. Esports is forever forward-looking, which is wonderful, but it is a massive blind spot for folks that are in it. You need to stop, you need to pause, you need to reflect on what you're doing. And that's one of my hopes, as part of somebody that's developing a collegiate esports program that sits very widely, is that, I want to bring a historical perspective of what we're doing. Because there has been a tremendous amount of amnesia and a collective social memory that has disappeared around what has happened in the past. So with that, I would say, operationalize that for marketing itself. Yeah.
That's great advice for all the students and educators out there. Unfortunately, we're right at the end of our time together. Thank
And
you
real
so
quick,
much.
Peter, I do want to, sorry, I got to jump in and interrupt. I'm so sorry to jump in and interrupt. This is important to me, and I think a lot of people would agree when they hear it, right? You lose the power to network as easily when you stop being a student. If you're a student, reach out to everyone that you know and their friends and their grandparents and their friends of their grandparents and their friends of friends. Reach out to everyone and say, I'm a student, I have a passion, and I want to learn. People will listen to you. And you'll find that as soon as you get that piece of paper, they'll stop listening to you. And that's completely fine and normal. Everybody's got a job and a life they want to move on to, right? As a student, especially as high school and college students, you reach out to people that you want to be like and tell them, hey, I just want 30 minutes of your time to learn from you. You're going to get a yes 100 times out of 100. Be willing to go through those things and reach out to folks that might be a little scary to reach out to them, because they're going to say yes and you're going to gain stuff from that. So please, please, please network. That's the biggest thing I would say too.
Great advice, Jay. And hey, comes back to that sense of community as well. Well, thank you so much, Sky and Jay, for your time today. Thank you to everyone in attendance. And I'm going to pass it over to Richie for our usual station sign off.
Thank you all for being here. Happy gaming.